My name is Ryan. I am a Gene Keys guide, and I would like to share a simple understanding of what we call the Gene Keys approach, which, when we apply this approach, can be a very practical way of both deepening and even clarifying our process of contemplation, and that will then allow us to expand our capacity to receive insight, to even generate insight, and through this process of contemplation and this experience of insight, to really learn to trust ourselves and to follow our inner guidance more and more. So let's dive in here. The Gene Keys approach is made up of these four pillars: contemplation, inquiry, gentleness, and patience, which are really integral to the way that we bring this wisdom into our lives. In a sense, you could say these are the essence of the wisdom itself. The Gene Keys are here to help us become more contemplative, inquisitive, gentle, and patient people. And no matter what our particular genius is, the flourishing of our gifts, the unfolding of our higher purpose, our love, our prosperity in the world, they all rest on the foundation of these four qualities. So no matter what our individual Gene Keys are, it's really important that we learn how to approach them in this way. Now, there is a fifth hidden quality within the Gene Keys approach that I'm going to take the liberty of including here, and that is play. Now, play isn't actually a hidden quality within the Gene Keys. It's a huge part of the wisdom and of Richard's teaching. In a way, it really is the quintessence, the fifth element of the whole transmission. Because we're not monks praying in monasteries here, even if that is part of our path for some. This path, it's all about enjoying being ourselves, enjoying our lives in the world, becoming again as little children, as Jesus says. So when we talk about contemplation, inquiry, gentleness, and patience, it can sometimes be a bit boring. Or like it's a lot of work, or, it can be a bit painful even, especially at the beginning, or when it's something that we're not really used to. So it's really important that we remember this spirit of play when we approach the Gene Keys. They really are a path to enlightenment, and that path is all about lightening up, about playing. In the 46th Gene Key, which is one of the keys that really represents the child, it has this shadow of seriousness and the gift of delight. So when we catch ourselves, taking ourselves or, the Gene Keys too seriously, it can be a really good reminder that something's maybe a little bit off. A whisper in the ear saying, this is meant to be fun. Enjoy yourself. And just catching ourselves in that state of seriousness can, be a great wake-up call to just snap out of it, laugh at ourselves and get back to that feeling of delight, get back to that joy, go out and play again. So, yeah, let's remember that play as we continue along here. Now, that being said, when we think about play in the sense of a child, there's this quality of free-spiritedness or innocence and spontaneity to it. And those are good pointers for us to help us recognize our own genius. Who am I at play? Who am I when I am expressing these qualities of innocence and freedom? But on the other hand, I also think about play in terms of sports, for example, where in sports, most of the time you actually practice a lot more than you play. Or theater, where we do all these rehearsals before putting on the play. So, as much as play has this quality of free expression to it, there's also this paradoxical relationship with practice, where the more effort we put in practice, the more effortless our play becomes. And that's what I'd like to share here is a playful little practice that hopefully will help make it a little bit easier to play with our gene keys and also to enjoy ourselves and enjoy this approach a little bit more as well. So let's take a look. So this playful practice is what I affectionately call the contemplation sequence, where we take these four qualities of the Gene Keys approach together as a sequence, and we follow it one step at a time, beginning with contemplation, and all within this field of play. Now, the Gene Keys are all about sequences, and contemplation is the core pathway through the Gene Keys. So it does seem fitting that we would also approach contemplation as a sequence. Now, on the other hand, contemplation itself is very much about keeping a balance between both hemispheres of the brain, between yin and yang, between art and science. And of course, Richard's teaching is the art of contemplation, and it really complements well. It's this playful and artful complement to the more scientific and technical aspects of the Gene Keys. So, in that sense, approaching contemplation as a sequence may be a little too logical for some. But that's why we're just playing here. So play with this. Nothing is fixed. Breaking things down into a sequence is really just to help us understand, the process of contemplation, and hopefully to make it easier for us to practice. And as we see in the later stages of contemplation, anyway, everything kind of merges together into one. So at that stage, there is no sequence, but at this stage, a sequence can definitely be helpful. So with that in mind, let's begin. And we begin with contemplation, which in the beginning is about going within. And going within can have many different meanings, but in this case, it's really about taking our attention away from wherever it is outwardly and just bringing it in and becoming aware of ourselves inwardly. So this could be in a more formal practice like meditation or prayer, where we intentionally withdraw from our outer activity and we make time and space for our inner activity. We go within. And contemplation can also be a more informal practice where we just take these little pauses throughout the day. And again, we withdraw our attention from the outer and we become aware of ourselves and the inner. So in this case, we could be working or walking or talking with someone or just scrolling through our phone. And we kind of catch ourselves in the act. We become aware of whatever it is that we were doing, which has probably been unconscious on our part up to that point. And in that moment, we just become conscious. We become aware of ourselves. We don't even have to stop what we're doing. We just become aware of what we're doing. We become aware of ourselves while we're doing it. And this can be with thinking and feeling as well. Even though technically those are going on within us, it can be so easy to just get lost in thought or to get lost in feeling and, just forget ourselves for who knows how long. So contemplation is about finding ourselves in those moments when we're just lost or we've forgotten. And and just remembering ourselves, coming back to ourselves. And, there we are. We are within. So now that we've gone within in contemplation, what now? This is a question that many people have when meditating. I'm sitting here silently. What am I supposed to do? Well, in this case, we move to the next step in the sequence, which is inquiry, and it's about seeking guidance. And our inquiry can be a question, for example, about one of our gene keys words. So we could ask, how am I dishonest? Or what does dishonor mean for me? These are pretty standard gene keys inquiries. But it's not so much about a question per se as it is a quest. And because we've gone within, this is an inner quest. So we've gone within on this quest seeking guidance. And this guidance that we're seeking could be about anything, whatever we'd like to know or understand. We could be seeking an answer. We could be seeking truth. We could be seeking wisdom. We could be seeking inspiration. We could be seeking God. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be added unto you. Again, as Jesus said. So whatever it is that we're seeking, and whatever we imagine this guidance to be, the key is that it's coming to us from within. So we're on this quest seeking to be guided from within. And that's our inquiry. So now that we've gone within and we've begun our quest, we can move to the next step in the sequence, which is gentleness. And it's about quietly listening. Well, now that we've asked a question, we simply sit and listen for the answer. Of course, it's not really that simple. And this is why gentleness is so important here. Because to just sit and listen quietly, that can be hard, especially for little children who just want to be outside playing. So to be inside and listening, that's hard. Gentleness is a really pivotal point along this path for us. Because, anyone can take a moment and go within. And we all have questions. But to really sit and listen for the answers, to listen within ourselves, rather than going to a book or a teacher or an oracle of some kind for those answers. To listen within ourselves, that's hard. And we can be hard on ourselves at this point too. Hard on ourselves because we don't have the answer in the first place, or because we don't think we're going to find the answer and we need to go and look somewhere else for it, or hard on ourselves because the answer's not coming fast enough and we can't sit still for 30 seconds. Whatever it is, we can get all wound up here. And this is where we can catch ourselves again. We can pause come back within and remember that this approach, our approach, is not hard and fast. It's soft and slow and gentle. And when we meet this hardship, this hardness within ourselves, we're not pushing against it. We're not fighting it. We're yielding to it and just being with it. As Richard says in the Gene Keys, we're not dragon slayers, we're dragon healers. And we heal these dragons with gentleness. It's like in any mythic quest, another great theme of the Gene Keys. There's always these dragons to slay, or to heal, as we say. There are always trials and tests along the way. So when we're on this quest of ours, we need to be ready for it not to be all quiet and calm on the inside. There are dragons in there. There's a storm on the way. The storm is already there inside our DNA. So we're going to have to face this storm. And that's okay. Because it doesn't have to be all quiet and calm inside. There can be a storm going on in there. But rather than getting caught in that storm, rather than letting it sweep us away, we just kind of sit quietly within the storm. We listen to what it has to say. And the irony is that if our question, our inquiry, our quest is about one of our shadow words, then the storm itself is the answer. So when we're on this quest and we meet these storms, these dragons, and we're just gentle with them and we listen, who knows what answers we may hear. And then the storm will just pass on its own, and all will become quiet and clear. Alas, we have come to the final step in our sequence, which is patience and calmly receiving. Now that we've made it through the hard part of our quest, and we've quieted the inner storm with gentleness, here we can just wait, calmly and patiently, to receive this guidance that we've been seeking. And in this idea of waiting and receiving, there is a really good reminder that even though this guidance is something that we're going in and looking for, it's also something that comes to us. And there's an understanding here that at a certain point on our quest, we have to give up looking. We even have to give up listening. And all we can do is wait and be patient, and whatever it is that we're looking for will come to us whenever we are ready to receive it. We saw earlier how in contemplation we are balancing both hemispheres of the brain. And in it, there's a kind of equality between these opposite poles within us. And we can see that balance and equality reflected through this sequence. For example, in contemplation and inquiry, we are active. We're going within and we're seeking. And on the other hand, in gentleness and patience, we are passive. We're just quietly listening and receiving. So there's a balance here. And even though this contemplation practice is something that we're doing, it's just as much, if not more so, about what we're not doing. And that's what patience is about. It's about not doing. Patience is being calm and at ease while not doing anything. And even though patience is the final step in this sequence, we can see how it's really there the whole way. Because if we remember in the beginning with contemplation, we have to kind of stop what we're doing in order to go within. So this contemplation sequence begins and ends with not doing. And in a way, that's what this whole sequence is about. It's what this whole Gene Keys approach is. It's an exercise in patience that's here to help us become comfortable with not doing anything. One of the essential teachings that's really at the core of this whole Gene Keys synthesis is called Wu Wei, and it is the art of doing nothing. So it sounds kind of funny to say, but there really is this great wisdom in doing nothing. And the Gene Keys are here to help us unlock that wisdom by teaching us to be patient, by guiding us to become comfortable with doing nothing. And when it comes to this sequence, we're not necessarily doing nothing, although we can be. It's more that we're not doing anything on the outside, not taking any action, while we're waiting to receive guidance about what to do on the inside. And that takes patience. Although when we end up in this sphere, in this step, we kind of realize that in order to get here, in order to go within on this quest for guidance, and to listen inwardly for that guidance, and to be gentle with ourselves, even when it's hard, all of that takes patience. And while we've been sitting here doing nothing, actually, a lot has been going on. And rather than waiting to receive this guidance that we've been seeking, we're more likely to find that it's something that we already have. And what we now have is insight or inner sight. We see things clearly within ourselves. And this is the purpose of our contemplation, at least initially, to arrive at this insight. And insight can be something that arrives, like an aha moment, where something new or fresh just kind of pops in and we've got it. Or insight can also be like this place that we arrive at, this place of inner sight, where rather than aha, it's more of an ah. And rather than seeing anything new or different, it's more like we see what's already there in a new and different way. We see things as they really are with insight, without judgment or confusion or anything else that might interfere with our clear perception. It's like that famous saying that if the doors of perception were cleansed, we would see things as they really are, infinite. And it may not be quite so grandiose as that, but there is this sense of the infinite possibilities that lay within us now that we can see them. And our insight also includes each of these other aspects of the Gene Keys approach. It's like a synthesis of this whole sequence. So insight has this inward looking quality of contemplation that is conscious and aware. It's inquisitive, it's curious, it's open and wants to explore this inner world that we're now seeing clearly. It's gentle, it feels gentle. It's like this quiet place within us where there's no real tension or disturbance. It's patient. It's a patient place where we feel like we have all the time in the world to just receive whatever it is that our inner sight wants to show us. And finally, and maybe even most importantly, there's this quality of play. We want to play with our insight. And maybe we have to be careful here that it's not a kind of fantasy world that we escape into to go play in. It's more that we want to play with the material that we see in this inner world of ours by expressing it in some kind of physical, creative way. And that's actually what we do at the next stage of this sequence, which we'll touch on in a moment. But for now, all we're doing is following each step within the sequence in order to arrive at insight. Because we can see that by practicing each of these steps within the sequence, not only are we cultivating these qualities of contemplation, inquiry, gentleness, patience, and play, and building them into our character, but we're also, through this process, generating insight. We are expanding our capacity for inner sight. What we're really doing is developing this faculty of inner sight. And we can call this a sixth sense or a third eye, which in a way is what it is. But whatever it is that we call it, it's through this inner sight that we really begin to know ourselves and understand ourselves. And as we come to know ourselves, and as we come to trust whatever it is that we're seeing inside us and our understanding of it, this is how we truly begin to allow ourselves to be guided from within. And that's our insight. So, with that, we have come to the end of this sequence, which brings us back to where it all begins, to contemplation. And contemplation really is the key to the gene keys and to this approach. This is why it's called the contemplation sequence, with contemplation being this overarching process and these other qualities of the gene keys approach being aspects of contemplation which support that process. And it's the key because it's only by going within and breaking our attention out of whatever it might be busy with and coming back to ourselves. This is what brings us the awareness to remember who we are and why we're here. To remember to inquire and to be gentle and patient and to play. All of these reminders and the changes that they bring about inside us, all of these occur because we are consciously within. So contemplation leads to insight, and going within leads to being guided from within. With insight being this tool for inner guidance that lights the way. And our way, at least from the point of view of this sequence, is to begin again with contemplation. Only this time, with insight, another dimension opens to us. And as we move through the sequence, we do so in a new way. Now, before we get into this new way of moving through the sequence, which we'll look at in another video, there are a few final things to cover and to recap here. So to begin, this is the first of 3 stages of this contemplation sequence, which correspond to the 3 stages of contemplation. And those are outlined in The Art of Contemplation, which is a book and a course and a stream of wisdom that goes hand in hand with the gene keys. So these 3 stages are called pausing, pivoting, and merging. And this first stage then is all about pausing. And every time we go within, this is what we're doing. We are pausing. And it could be for a second or an hour or more. Whatever it is, we are putting life on pause in order to go within. Also in the gene keys, there are these other 3 stages of transformation, which coincide with our contemplation. And these 3 stages are called allow, accept, and embrace. So this first stage is all about pausing and allowing for whatever it is that's going on inside of us, be it thoughts, feelings, sensations, whatever's arising within us or not, doesn't matter, all of it's allowed. And this is what leads to insight, because by just going within and allowing whatever's in there to just be without fighting it or fleeing from it, this is how we just see. We just witness ourselves. And whether or not we accept what we see, whether or not we trust our insight, that's another story. This is what happens in stage 2, which is about accepting our insight and breaking through. But in order to get there, first we have to be here. We have to be in this place of insight. And it's a challenge to get here. Or rather, it's a challenge to recognize when we are here, because here is a very natural place to be. But to go on this quest for inner sight, for inner guidance, this is a challenge. And challenge is the first stage of another gene keys trinity of challenge, breakthrough, and core stability. So in order to break through our challenges, we first have to face them and see them for what they are. And in this case, our challenge is to stop, look, listen, wait, and see, and to enjoy ourselves while not doing this. And this is what this contemplation sequence is for. It's here to help guide us through this challenge, to be a bridge from going within to being guided from within, and to give us something to do while we're pausing. So this is something that we can do all in one pause, a more extended one where we just sit down and work through something however long it takes. Or this can be something that's done over a series of pauses where we just catch ourselves for little moments throughout the day. And we come back within to our quest. And we remember to be gentle and to listen and to be patient and to enjoy this inner play that we can now clearly see. There is another layer to this contemplation sequence, which I'd like to briefly introduce before we bring this first round to a close. And that's what this little journey of ours has been here. It's been an introduction to some of the key themes that are involved in how we approach and understand the gene keys. There is, however, a deeper understanding that can be found when we consider that for each step within this sequence, there is a corresponding gene key. So for each quality from contemplation all the way to insight and play, there is a gene key that corresponds to that quality. So again, rather than jumping into the next stage of this sequence, we're going to linger here a little and hopefully come to a more well-rounded understanding of both contemplation and the gene keys by seeing how the two of them fit together through this sequence. So stay tuned for that. And that's it. Thank you very much for tuning in to this contemplation sequence. I hope you've enjoyed it, that it's been helpful in some way. If you have any questions or feedback or insights to share that have come up for you around this, I'd certainly love to hear from you. As for me, I've had a lot of fun playing with this sequence myself and putting it into practice while putting this presentation together. So I'm really grateful for that opportunity. And I'm looking forward to continuing to do so as we dive and explore a little deeper here. But for now, we'll take a little pause, enjoy doing nothing for a while, and hope to see each other again soon. Okay, much love.